975 7559. Hey everyone, got a couple minutes before we start. 12:13. We'll start right at 12:15. Appreciate you all joining. Got about 1 minute till we start. Appreciate everybody being here and excited to bring you guys some new information. 45 seconds. All right, here we go. 12:15 and we'll get rolling. Thanks again, everyone, for being here. My name is John Lynch. I'm the director of the Stafford Fitness Center and strength and conditioning coach here at St. Lawrence. And if you were not in the first session, that's absolutely fine. We are recording this session, so feel free to keep your mute on and your cameras off, and I'll just kind of roll through it. If you guys have any questions about this stuff, you can definitely email or feel free to reach out to me. Kind of the long-term idea here is to take this information and give everybody kind of an idea of what we're trying to get done here in the fitness center, and then start to employ some classes probably in January to help you guys with pain management, and particularly for people who are sitting frequently throughout the day to learn some drills that they can use to really help them feel a whole lot better on a consistent basis. So with that being said, we'll roll right into session 2 of PHIT, applying the Fibonacci sequence to fitness. And here's the roadmap kind of on the left. And I'll just review this each session because I think it's really important to kind of bring it back, even though we're going to talk about a whole ton of details here. But last session, we talked about the human condition and the shared stressors that we all have to deal with, even though we're all highly individual people. So those kind of include breathing posture and physiology, the mechanics of breathing and rib movement, what the pathology is, which we'll then review in our manual, or not manual exercise, but our hands-on exercise today. And then sagittal plane competency, which we'll reel back in and go over again, because we'll build on that from sagittal plane down to a frontal plane today, which you can see in session 2, which we'll get into talking about what stress actually does to your body, what stress is, biotensegrity, which is a kind of a combination of a couple of terms that I'll talk about, fascial lines, which is how your body actually works, and how the central nervous system impacts posture through a phenomenon that we call reciprocal inhibition. And then we'll reel it in on the third session next week and really talk about how all of this relates back to the mathematical concept of phi and sacred geometry and spiral lines, and how that all affects your body with physics. So just on the right, I do want to touch on the big picture, which I think is important to understand, and I'm still struggling with understanding some of these things because they're pretty in depth. Each one of these can certainly be its own full session, but just to roll through this, stress is really just simply the disruption of homeostasis in the body in any sense. That stress creates adaptation in the body on a consistent basis. Those stressors help us navigate the world and be successful in whatever situations we get ourselves into. The central nervous system response to stress is what dictates posture, and because muscles are all interconnected, turning one on means turning one off. And so we'll kind of get into the depth of that today. Muscle chains run in spiral lines, and so those spiral lines are connected by fascia, which controls the position of bones based on sympathetic tone or stress. And those spiral lines of muscle are pretty consistent with others found in nature. We'll get a little bit into that today, and ultimately using the algorithm of PHI to derive some stress interventions that can really help you. So without any further ado, stress management. So really, what is stress? And I kind of said it earlier, but stress is just any input received by the brain. Okay, so you woke up today and it was maybe dark when you woke up, and then it was light, or the sound of the alarm going off, or you putting on your clothes for the day. Those are all stressors that you may not think of as stress, but you sense it. So anything you sense is stress. And I just like that image because stress is really perceptual. Some people have higher levels of anxiety than others. I mean, there's a ton of studies on that. And so if you perceive something as stressful, then it is. And how stressful it is depends on how you perceive it. So all those things matter. And just one quick quote that really resonates with me is just muscular tension and emotional tension in the body are one and the same. So the fact of the matter is, if you can improve your posture using certain exercises that relax certain muscles or activate certain muscles, then you can actually adjust your stress level by doing that. And so that's ultimately what we're trying to get done. Just to talk a little bit about how this all works. So you have your sympathetic stressors and parasympathetic stressors. So this is essentially fight or flight, rest or relax, right? Something happens, your car breaks down, or you wake up, you miss your alarm, you wake up late, bang, sympathetic stress, right? Oops, I got to get out of this situation. When you have sympathetic stress, that innervation happens, which in the picture of the brain and the spinal cord that you can see on the left, okay, those muscles from T1 to L2 are the muscles in a physical sense that become active when sympathetic stress happens, okay? In contrast, that also inhibits smooth muscle. So as you can see, the same neural innervations to the muscle from T1 to L2 also exist into the liver, the intestines, kidney, and internal organs, because if we're in a situation that we have to get out of right now, we don't have time to worry about the internal processes of the body in a lot of senses. And so that's a protective mechanism of your body and your brain to keep you alive. And, it just happens to be today that, you might read an email or receive a phone notification that, your brain senses as highly sympathetic. Well, that's not going to kill you. But that stress is the same to your body. So I think that's important to understand. And on the other side of that is parasympathetic, which essentially does the opposite. So you can see the innervations there, cranial, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but from the cranial nerve and the sacral nerve, that's where the muscular innervations are through the parasympathetic side of the nervous system. That will stimulate smooth muscle and inhibit skeletal muscle. So if you're in a situation that's calming, or whatever it is for you, drinking hot tea or sitting by the fire or reading a book or whatever it is you can do to relax. If you were in the last session, it was slow, controlled breathing that's methodical and strategic. Those can stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system and really help to deactivate skeletal muscle that could be contributing or almost certainly is contributing to situations of stress for your body. All right. So now that we kind of laid the ground rules on that, we'll move on and talk about the term biotensegrity. And biotensegrity is a term that it's kind of a combination of two terms, one coined by Buckminster Fuller, which is tensegrity, and then obviously bio is kind of just biological, but it's the architectural model of tension and compression applied to biology. And so you can see I've cited Da Vinci there circa 1940, it's kind of as a joke, honestly, but the Vitruvian Man, and to me the Vitruvian Man is the roadmap for the perfect geometrical shape of the human body. So can you imagine if you had a ravine that you had to build a bridge across, to combat gravity, of course, then based on that ravine, there would be an adequate bridge to build. And to me, the Vitruvian Man is, based on gravity, the most architecturally, symmetrical or perfect version in terms of lever length. And so we'll get more into that today and also later next week. But on the right, you can kind of see what biotensegrity looks like in a couple of figures. So you kind of have this just geometrical shape where there are wooden rods held together by rubber bands. And just to appreciate what we're trying to talk about is, in this case, the wooden rods are the bones and the rubber bands are the muscle. And when you push down on that unit, you can appreciate the fact that some of those bands get tighter and others, or not tighter, but more constricted, and others get less constricted. That same thing happens in the body. Neither of them are tighter or looser. It's both absolute, because it's about the position of the bone or the compressive component of that structure. But one thing happening on one side affects something happening on the other side every single time. And then there are just some models that you can kind of see it built out in how it would look in the human body if you were kind of a robot, I guess. So that exists in our body and our bones, and here's how. We call it polyarticular muscle chains, and I've got in the next slide a deeper level image of this. But muscles don't just work in isolation, they work in chains. Which polyarticular just means they cross more than one joint. The chain of muscles crosses more than one joint, and there are a number of chains of muscles in the body that cross all the joints, or essentially joints from toe to finger, or toe to the head, or what it might be. So these chains are comprised of both muscle and fascia, and tension affects the entire chain. So if there's one muscle that's tight and condensed, then another muscle is also tight, but it's just tight and elongated. So I'll show you that in the next slide. And that really impacts all three planes of motion. Most of these chains intersect all major joints. Proficiencies dictate deficits. So everybody's body is different, and where you hold tension is going to dictate where you have problems. I hope you can, understand that law of conservation of energy kind of from the last slide. And then chronic stimulus creates pathologies, right? If your body adapts to everything that it goes through all the time, then the positions you put your body in, the motions that you do, you get better at. Even right now, you're getting better at watching me talk on Zoom. I'm getting better at doing the Zoom. So those stimuluses help us in certain ways, and in an absolute sense based on what we did. All right. So on the left, you can just kind of see this is an image from a cadaver of that posterior muscle chain. And just at the bottom here, I guess, I don't know if my taskbar is in the window, maybe it is, oops. But on the bottom is your plantar aponeurosis or plantar fascia. Some of you might have plantar fasciitis, which is the bottom of your foot having, tendonitis, basically. And then that goes up into the calf, which crosses the knee and goes up into the hamstring, which crosses the hip and goes up into your ilium or ischium and your hip bone, into your, where's my cursor, into your lower back, upper back. And this epicranial fascia is what goes up to your head and kind of attaches your eyebrows, which is why when you raise your eyebrows, Your hair moves. So that's just a way to see that muscle chain in reality. So the idea being, like, if you are a person with plantar fasciitis, then that plantar fascia is being pulled long. And why? Probably because the calf muscle or the hamstring muscle here are contracting and holding postural stability and taking tension away from this part of the chain. So we have strategies that we can use, and we'll build into it in a seated position now, but later in January here in the fitness center, that can teach you how to get that hamstring to activate in order to turn off the calf, or the glute or the low back or the upper back to activate, to deactivate other muscles in that same chain and restore adequate length tension relationships. On the right, you can see an image of a person which what we would call just a generally slouched posture, right? If you're looking at the pinned Coach Lynch, well, I've got it pinned so I can see, but if you're seeing me from the side right now, or that picture, right, if I'm slouched, then I have this forward head position, which creates tension, a long tension on the upper trap and shoulder, top of the neck, shoulder, and then increased contractibility and still this equal amount of tension, but locked into a short position. All right. So is muscle tightness a myth? Well, what do you mean by tightness? Because they're both tight equally, except one muscle is constricting and then the other one is being pulled on. And usually and here's a little Easter egg for you. You can see eccentrically loaded down there. The source of the symptom is the muscle that's being pulled on. So if you have pain, if you're a person who has pain in their neck or upper trap, then upper trap is not where you need to stretch or massage. It's really probably the shoulder, the chest, and other strategic places based on your bony structures and your levers. Okay, remember that bridge over the cavern. All right, so this is posture, and there's two images here that I think are really important to understand what we're looking at and the differences. Really, we'll just focus on the one on the left for now, which is general compensation patterns. And remember, in the beginning of the presentation, I talked about you get nervous, sympathetic nervous central nervous system activation from the thoracic, the thoracic to the lumbar spine when a stressful event occurs. So if you're a caveman on the Sahara and then there's a lion in front of you, bang, that muscle tightens up. And when that muscle tightens up, it sends a cascade of tension through all of our muscle chains that allow us to escape that situation, which might save your life if you're running from a lion. Probably running from a lion, maybe not, but you get the point. Today, it's a text or an email, bang, sympathetic compensation doesn't help you, but it still exists as a primal response to stress. So just in the checklist there, you can see it's really the organ displacement that creates that. Your heart's on the left, your liver's on the right, your lungs are different sizes. And because of that general asymmetry, that puts you in what we call right stance, which we'll get into. That's a deeper concept that we may not get into even in the scope of next class, but if you're in our fitness class, you'll see it. And how do we fix that? How do we get out of that situation? The sympathetic stress response kickstarts those tensile components, like I mentioned, and that creates a very predictable and common length tension symptom in your body. So if you come talk to me and you tell me, hey, I got lower back pain, or I got groin pain, or I got plantar fasciitis, or I got shoulder pain when I raise up, then those are all clues to how your body is taking on stress, and interventions through a concept that we call reciprocal inhibition that can help to mitigate that stressor by affecting the length tension relationship of muscle. Then there are individual compensations. So remember the Vitruvian Man? Well, that's the architecturally perfect human body. Not everybody's got that skeletal system. So some people's arms are longer, some people's legs are longer, and vice versa. Based on your lever length, that will determine the magnitude of compensation at all joints, but also at particular joints. So if you've got a longer humerus, or the arm, the femur is the thigh. If your spine is longer, all these things are going to create different situations compared to gravity in your body, and then the compensation pattern will be based on that leverage. All right. Common postures or tasks become neurologically ingrained, like we said before. So regardless of your body, the tasks you do in relation to that leverage is also heavily going to dictate what postures you hold, how you how you respond to doing the things you do all the time. And then hopefully you can see that text of my taskbar is not in the way, but muscular tension in spiraling chains results in triplanar compensation. So I'll jump back to the image on the left, and this is just looking at it kind of from a sagittal plane view or a front to back view. And I hope you can appreciate when there is a tension problem at the core. So I'll stand up so you can see from my rib to my hip. If I'm kind of dumping forward here and this is expanding, then that creates a triplanar cascading of muscular tensions, which create a shoulder lift on the left, a hip dip on the right, and vice versa. You can see the arrows all going through the body. And you may have, like if you have knee pain on the left, then that's going to be a glute med problem, because that glute med is the muscle that gets that knee to go to the outside rather than the inside. So there's just simple kind of things like that that we can use as clues. If you come and if you were to come to me and say, hey, I got this issue going on, then I might ask you a couple more questions, but you can get to the bottom of it fairly quickly. On the image on the right, this kind of shows, in comparison to the Vitruvian Man, what the Fibonacci sequence would be and how that would affect the human body. All right. So what we're looking at here is kind of the golden rule or the golden ratio of thirds. All right. So the red line is 2/3 the length of the blue line, which we'll talk more about next week and why that matters. But when we have situations where bony components or leverages are closer to that 1/3, a phi ratio, then we're a whole lot less likely to get problematic situations in those areas. So this is just a kind of an image to help you appreciate that, where even the skull, where you can see the width to the height matters. You can see in the humerus to the forearm, where that forearm, including the hand, is going to be about, I'll say it, that the humerus is about 2/3 the length of the forearm, and the hip to the knee versus the knee to the ankle. So these patterns exist all over our body. These are just a few of them. And those are really, really effective in kind of determining your predisposition to muscular compensation. Moving on, got 10 minutes. So we'll get into now the practical application. And if you could just pin Coach Lynch, it's the side angle view of me that can help you get a better look at kind of what we're doing. And I'm just going to turn my computer here so I can read this and go through it with you. But this is, if you were here last week, this is a very similar slide, and we're going to go through it and add one more component now of the frontal plane. So first, remember, we got to get sagittal plane compensation patterns to cease before we can think about the frontal plane. So we'll go back through it. The tall seated position, sit on the front edge of your chair with what I like to call the sit bones, or the two bottom parts of your hip, okay? And you might notice that one of those has a little bit more pressure than the other. Based on the image on the last slide, you might notice that the right side has a little bit more pressure than the opposite. You might notice that the left. So we're trying to have a situation, which we'll talk about in frontal plane, in that gold box at the bottom that we'll talk about. But right now, just try to be even on your sit bones. Lower the chair as much as you can. So I don't know if you can see, here we go. So right now, this is my hip. My hip is right there. My armrest in the way, but my hip is right here. And it's above my knee in this situation. So I would just want to lower that down pretty much as low as I can. If I'm in this situation, my hip and knee are just about equal. It would probably be better for me to grab a book or something like that. Matter of fact, I have one. Let me grab let me just grab Gray's Anatomy. How about that? There we go, Gray's Anatomy. Put that right under my feet. That's also going to be a narrow base for me. So anyways, I'm going to put that under my feet. Maybe you guys can do something like that. I just want to have equal tension through my feet down into that book. So that's going to really help me get my knee higher than my hip. And that's important because when the knee is higher than the hip flexor muscle is inhibited, and you can start to get manipulation through the hip bone. All right. So right here. Okay. Knees right over the toes. So get in just a little bit. Feet flat, right? So if your feet are flat on the ground, and even with me on the book, I can still get it kind of through my shoes, but you want to feel big toe, ball of the foot, and heel evenly down, and just lean in and put a little bit of tension through that foot. Okay, position the armrest, as you can see as I was doing that, so that your elbow can barely touch them. For me, it's pretty close to all the way down. Maybe I'll move it up one notch from the bottom, and you want them to be about the same. Might take you a second to get there. But in this situation, I'm able to actually push down into that armrest a little bit, and I'm feeling the muscles of my bottom of my rib and abdomen fire. And that's really key to getting sagittal plane, stabilization, I'll call it. So remember now, where does the air go? Okay, so we're going to have to move our hands here, but we're going to go right hand, right on the collarbone, and palm right in the middle of the sternum, thumb right on the sternum, and then fingers kind of onto that left rib. So here it is right here. Okay, you can see that. And then remember, set up with your feet. And when you breathe, inhale in the nose for about 3 seconds, exhale out the mouth for about 6. Where does air go? Do a breath now. 3, 2, 1. We'll do one more breath. Inhale. Out. 3, 2, 1. And I just want you to feel where air goes. Remember, if you breathe in and your rib raises up, then that is a sagittal plane compensation where the low back is tight. In that situation, you want to breathe into your back. So if you can see my side view, inhaling through the back looks like this. Out the rib. One more so you can see, inhale in the back. And you might get a rounding, that's okay. If you're a person where when you breathe in, that already happens, then you're the opposite, okay? So you want to inhale into the front, okay? So inhale, and really what I mean by into the front is into the ribs. And so as the front raises up, you're also going to have expansion of that bucket handle of the rib on the outside. All right, so remember, the key is to get 360-degree expansion of the rib cage on inhale, and then exhalation, everything compresses down. All right, so that's the breathing sequence. Inhale for 3, exhale for 6, pause for 1 second, swallow if you can, because that's going to help to inactivate or deactivate the diaphragm, and then the diaphragm can dome a little better. So that's a little key for you. But where does air go? Either in the back, if it fills the back, try to get it more in the front, like it's pulling up. If it goes in the back anyway, if it goes in the front, then you're trying to exhale, keep the rib down, and allow air to expand into the back. Just simply by doing that, you're going to manipulate the length-tension relationship of the muscles that you hold stress in, and that simple drill can help you reduce pain already. And we'll add one piece to it now. Remember the sit bones I'm talking about. I want to do 2 things. I'm going to breeze through this because we got 4 minutes left. But looking at me straight ahead, okay? I want you to appreciate how in this situation, what 2 things we're trying to do. First is a hip hike, okay? So with the elbows into the pads, and now just think about lifting this left hip up. It's going to be a small movement, but up like that. I don't know if you can see that. Up like that. So it's basically this way, where I'm kind of lifting that left sit bone off the chair just a little bit, and subsequently pushing that right sit bone into the chair just a little bit. That will help to stimulate muscles in the frontal plane now to create some symmetry. So try to do a couple breaths. Inhale, expand the ribs. Exhale, push the elbows down. And then lift that hip slightly up and nothing else. Hold that and breathe in. Lift a little bit more on the exhale. Okay, so you probably feel low back. I'm feeling definitely low back, sides of the hips. That's all really good. And you doing that just a couple times a day can help with chronic pain like crazy. We'll add one more piece to it, and I'll just turn. I'm just going to turn a slight like 45 to the camera here. And this is a hip shift. So try this with me now. From that same position, inhale and expand. Really probably the back for most people. Exhale, out for 6, elbows into the armrest. Feel the ribs activate, lift that left sit bone and hold. The next piece of the progression is going to be what we call a hip shift, where this left knee is coming back toward the hip and really in toward the right hip. So it kind of looks like this. Okay, not a whole lot of movement there, but as you can see, my left leg is pulling back into my body, and I'm feeling work all on the inside of my groin, all the way in tight to my hip bone. And if you're feeling that, you got it right. If you're feeling it in the top and in the front, you got to do a better job of getting the exhale and the work in the front first. Okay, so if you're feeling it in the top of your hip, stay on the first progression. If you're feeling it in the inside in the groin, then you got it right. Okay, so that's a really easy thing you can do. And if you can get that progression, a couple times a day working for you, then that's going to be huge for you, offsetting the stresses of sitting and being in a relaxed posture in the lower body for longer periods of time. All right, just a couple things to close it out. And I talked about this a little bit last time, but it's your systems that determine your achievements. Okay, and in this case, it's your system of posture or your system of breathing or your system of activity that determines how your posture is, which determines how your pain is, or whatever it might be. Remember, you adapt on a consistent basis. Okay, so build a system like sitting at your desk, and every 1 hour an alarm goes off, and you take 5 minutes and you breathe and you try to feel that muscular tension, because even a little bit of offsetting that pattern in the day can do really wonders to help him with chronic pain. Intent and consistency dictate the systems. All right, this stuff doesn't work if you don't really try to get an exhale, if you don't really think about trying to get that groin to turn on. Okay, so try to take I hope I explained it well, but take what I said and really think about how that feels and try to connect your mind to that muscle, and that is going to really help you to be successful within that system of healing or recovery or adjusting length tension relationships. PHIT in itself is a system for wellness that can be done anytime. Okay, so you might see me walking funny, you might see me doing a hip stretch when I'm standing in position. I have learned, and I'll teach you how to manipulate these postures and muscular tensions in different positions. So certainly we can do it sitting, but also we can do it standing. We can do it running. We can do it in lunging or squatting or core work. There's tons of ways and different things we can do in different positions that can really help to hammer down the positions of those bones and the positions of the muscular chains. And ultimately, it's up to you, right? Nobody can do it but you. You're the one with the control. You have to make the choice in real time. So if that alarm goes off, do it now. Just do it right now. Do it in real time. And the more often you can do it in real time, the closer you are to having no issues at all and being honestly the best version of yourself. So that's PHIT. That's session 2. Really appreciate everybody jumping on. We'll be throwing these recordings out once I get them processed. But super excited to be here and working with all you guys. And hopefully I'll see you in January. Hopefully I'll see you again next week for the final installment. All right. So thanks again. And I'll catch you later.